Today we are discussing alien abductions, the truth about what they really are. And I'm going to tell you that information that you're going to hear right now is information that you probably haven't heard anywhere else. And this gets into this idea in a way that's completely different. And this is honestly one of my favorite things to discuss. And you are going to see why once we get into this. First of all, we're going to be taking a look at channeled information that has to do with negative entities and the reason for their supposed examination on people. And we're going to be looking at medical research in the 90s done by a doctor. And I want to emphasize that this is probably not going to be about what you think that it is. This has to do with interdimensional entities. This has to do with emotions. This has to do with the soul. It has to do with sexuality. It's very interesting information and stuff that you need to hear, stuff you need to know, because it has to do with the power that's inside of you right now and what you really are. This is going to be great stuff. So we're going to get started right away. Just before we do, I want to remind you, please, hey, hit like, hit subscribe. We're growing incredibly fast, and the more likes, the more subscribes, the more we can get this information out there. There's a lot of bullshit out there, and with my channel, I really like to cut through the bullshit. We're transitioning to a higher consciousness right now, and it's time that people have access to this information that they can use in a really real and realistic way. Without all the insanity that is out there. Also, be aware of scammers in the comments. There are people pretending to be me, saying I have a WhatsApp or a Telegram. That's not me. Don't fall for it. Also, be aware that there are people and groups out there who don't like what I'm doing and what we're doing here, and they don't want this information to get out. So they are spreading a lot of disinformation and misinformation and craziness in general about me and our group and what we do. So just, keep your eyes open, use your reason, and don't fall for the bullshit. All right, let's begin. Today we are talking about alien abductions, what they really are. So again, there's going to be a lot of twists and turns here. Stick with me because it's going to be good. I guarantee it. So the first thing that we're going to look at just for a minute is information from the Law of One. We've been talking a lot about the Law of One recently, and you're going to see why we're looking into this specifically. And for those who don't know, the Law of One is a series of channeled transmissions from an interdimensional entity that calls itself Ra, that contacted a research group in the 1980s known as LL Research. By going in, one of their members would go into a trance state and receive information from this being. Now, we always have to remember that when we look at this information, this is highly speculative information. We don't know if this information is real. It could be made up, and but it could be real, but it could also be made up, or it could be a manifestation of the channeler's unconscious mind, being tuned into the collective unconscious. That's another possibility. But there's a specific reason why I want to take a look at this information, is because some of the things that they say about the examination process of negative entities correlates a lot with what we're going to look at in just a minute, dealing with medical research done in the 90s and gateways to another dimension. So let's take a look at that right now. So we're going to bring up, like I said, this is from the Law of One. So for those, and by the way, if you're interested in the Law of One and the raw material, I have a whole playlist on it. It's some really interesting information. Go check it out. But where we left off last time with the Law of One, it was discussing alien, negative entities. And let's just and I always have to remind people too, if you're not familiar with the Law of One, this is a lot different. It has to do with interdimensional beings. It has to do with things taking place in the domain of mind, etc. But let's take a look at this. So the questioner is asking this entity who calls itself Ra, are both those who are taken on Confederation and Orion craft then experiencing a seemingly physical examination? Okay, so two things that's going to be important for what we're going to look at in a minute. So what the questioner is asking is, so according to Ra, there are sort of two factions of beings. There are beings who are part of what Ra calls the Confederation, and then another group that they say belongs to a group called Orion, or the Orion group. The Confederation are a group of positively oriented entities, and the Orion group is a group of negatively oriented entities. And so the questioner is saying, well, people who are taken on Confederation and Orion craft, do they experience a seemingly physical examination? And so just keep this idea in mind of different kinds of entities, because I think a lot of people have a misconception. You know, a lot of people, there's so many misconceptions about this sort of thing. And one of them is, remember, I always think in terms of interdimensional beings, not beings as they're depicted in sci-fi movies, little green men on planets with laser guns, but rather interdimensional beings, highly evolved beings that are beings of frequencies. Now, and can exist in different forms and different domains. But people are always like, oh, well, are they good or are they bad? Well, that's kind of like saying, hey, that person over there, are they good or are they bad? I don't know. It depends. There are some good people. There are some bad people. Well, same thing to do with, these evolved beings is that it's very, very likely that, that there are those with different intentions, those who want to see humanity grow and evolve, and those who would prefer to have a system that is more in line with their ideas of control and enslavement. So anyway, Ra's answering this question and says, I am Ra. Your query indicates incorrect thinking. The Orion group uses the physical examination as a means of terrifying the individual and causing it to feel the feelings of an advanced second density being, such as a laboratory animal. The sexual experiences of some are a subtype of this experience. The intent is to demonstrate the control of the Orion entities over the Terran inhabitant. The thought form experiences are subjective and, for the most part, do not occur in this density. Okay, so this is what's really important to take away, because we're going to take a look at information now from another source, and I want you guys to compare it to what's just been said, all right? And so just to reiterate the important parts, what Ra is saying is that the Orion group, which is a group of negative entities, uses physical examination to terrify the individual, making them feel like a lab rat, basically, to cause these emotions of fear and different kinds of emotions to arise, and that there are also sexual experiences as well to demonstrate the control that these entities have over the individual. And then here's the other important part. The thought form experiences are subjective and for the most part do not occur in this density. In other words, what Ra is saying is this isn't occurring in the physical world. It's a thought form experience. It's subjective. It's an internal experience. So let's keep this in mind. And remember, I just want to reiterate, this is speculative. We don't know if this information is true or not. Okay? I just always want to reiterate this because we want to stay fully grounded in logic and reason. But we're going to turn from something that's highly speculative to something much more concrete, but I want you to compare the two. So what we're going to turn to now is clinical trials that were done between 1990 and 1995 by Dr. Rick Strassman. So Dr. Rick Strassman, let me just read to you a quick summary of what this is. Dr. Rick Strassman conducted the first U.S. government-approved and funded clinical research with psychedelic drugs in over 2 decades. He administered approximately 400 doses of DMT to 60 volunteers at the University of New Mexico's School of Medicine. So essentially, these were clinical trials, research undergone by a medical doctor, Dr. Rick Strassman, between 1990 and 95 in a clinical setting, in a clinical setting. He administered, I think, intravenously doses of DMT in a very controlled setting. So Why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about trials with DMT? Well, let me explain to you why, and we'll get into this. And trust me, like this is, you need to hear this information. This is stuff that people need to hear about, need to be thinking about, need to be contemplating. So DMT, when under the influences of DMT, participants reported intense visual hallucinations, emotional experiences, and encounters with various entities or beings. These experiences were often described as more real than everyday reality. Okay, so that's an important point to note. So for those who don't know, DMT is the strongest psychedelic substance. Not only is DMT the strongest psychedelic substance, it's in your body right now. Your body produces it. Your body creates it. So it's natural to you. Humans create this drug that, when it is done, transports you to a seemingly other world. And people might be thinking, well, wait a minute, how is that possible? How can you go to another world if your body is here? Well, you have to remember the materialist paradigm, the idea that reality is physical, is absolutely incoherent, illogical, and was really destroyed in the early 1900s, particularly in the 1920s, when de Broglie discovered matter waves and discovered that matter was not material-like at all, but was wave-like. And so the idea that reality is material is an illogical, inconsistent, and utterly obliterated paradigm. So when you have to think about reality being in terms of frequencies. Reality is a domain of frequencies, and what we aren't our bodies. Our bodies are what just allows us to tune into this particular range of frequencies, this particular band of frequencies. You can think of our bodies as sort of like a tuner on the radio that allows us to tune into a particular channel. What we aren't these bodies. We're eternal minds. You could call them souls. We call them zetas. Zetas are an infinite individual mind that contains infinite energy, infinite frequencies that balance out to zero. So we, as eternal minds, as zetas, use these avatars, linking to them in order to tune into a specific range of frequencies, and that is the frequencies associated with this domain. So essentially, what the proposition would be is what DMT has to do is altering the functioning of the avatar to introduce in such a way where the mind tunes into a different range of frequencies. In other words, changes the channel. If you think of reality as being like a TV set with a bunch of different TV channels on it, right now we're all tuned into the same channel, but if you change the channel, you'll be tuned into a completely different realm entirely. So when we're talking about other realms, we're not talking about other planets. We're not talking about spaceships. We're talking about other dimensions that can be accessed via your soul or your mind. And it's not even, when I say your mind, it's not what you have, it's what you are. You are a mind. You are an eternal being of frequencies. But let's continue here and stick with me because this is going to get crazy. I guarantee it. So, participants report intense visual hallucinations, encounters with entities or beings, and these experiences were described as more real than everyday reality. And that's what's important to note, is that when you have a dream, yeah, you can have a dream that feels really real, but when you're awake, you're like, oh yeah, that was just a dream. It doesn't, people who have DMT experiences report it after they have had the trip, when they are back to a baseline normal state of consciousness, say, that felt more real than this reality. By the way, I've had experience with DMT. I'll explain it. I'll give you my opinions on it once we get more into this. But by the way, quick disclaimer, don't do anything dangerous, don't do anything illegal, and never feel pressured to do any of these things, okay? All right. By the way, just real quick, we're setting the stage for what we're really going to get into here. Duration. DMT has a rapid onset and short duration of action, typically lasting about 15 to 30 minutes. And 30 minutes, that's even a long time. It's more like 10 to 15 minutes. In other words, it's a very short duration. It happens, you're gone, poof, and then you come back. But the experience can seem like it takes longer than what it actually does. One of the most intriguing findings from Strassman's research was the frequency with which participants reported encounters with sentient, non-human entities. These experiences were so consistent across participants that Strassman dubbed DMT the spirit molecule. Okay. Strassman hypothesized about the role of DMT in the human body. Because remember, your body produces DMT, which is, just think about how interesting this is. This is a substance that seemingly transports one to another dimension, possibly. And your body produces it naturally. It's quite interesting, don't you think? So Strassman hypothesized that the pineal gland, which is a small gland in the brain, might produce DMT at certain times, like birth, death, and during mystical or near-death experiences. However, this theory remains speculative and more research is needed to confirm or refute it. That's important to remember as well. I get a lot of people, particularly from the New Age community or spiritual community, who kind of say that, act like this is fact. Like, oh yeah, the pineal gland produces DMT when you're born and at death. That's not proven in any way, in any capacity at all. So I just want to make that clear. It's a theory, but it's a very interesting theory. What we do know for sure is that the body produces DMT. We just don't know where and when and why. But Strassman's, and what I think is, we're going to read some of these reports, okay? We're going to read some of these reports, and they are fascinating. Now, we're going to read, and what I want you to keep in mind here is that Dr. Strassman went into this not expecting this to happen at all. Sorry, there's a package at my door. Annoying. Anyway, what's really interesting about this is Rick Strassman, the doctor who conducted this research, did not go into this expecting this. He did not expect this to occur. And you can see in the accounts, he even tries to convince patients that, like, hey, not patients, but volunteers or whatever. He tried to convince them or push them in the direction of, oh yeah, like a dream, right? Or, oh yeah, like a hallucination, right? Or, oh yeah, like an archetype, right? And the participants were like, no, not like that at all. And so Rick Strassman was very surprised by all this, was not what he expected, and was pretty blown away himself at what was found. So let's actually jump into some of the reports here. And remember what we read in the Law of One. I want you to compare the similarities. Because remember, just to refresh your memory real quick, that physical examination as a means of terrifying individuals to elicit emotion, sexual experiences to elicit feelings of control, and that these are thought form experiences that are subjective, not physical, not in this dimension, basically. Very, very interesting. So let's bring this up. So by the way, these are expert excerpts from his book. He wrote a book, which I highly recommend, by the way. Go get it, go read it. It's called DMT, the Spirit Molecule, a doctor's revolutionary research into the biology of near-death and mystical experiences. Highly, highly recommend it. They have a documentary on it. It's crap, in my opinion. So I love the book. I couldn't watch the documentary. I got through like 10 minutes of documentary and I turned it off because it was annoying. I did not enjoy it. But the book is fantastic. Can't recommend it enough. It's a great book. So if you enjoy some of the excerpts that we're going to read from this, go, get this book, read this book. It's great. So first thing I want to read real quick Strassman says, only later, when the study was well underway, did I also begin considering DMT's role in the alien abduction experience. So what here, I'll just read the first. So let me just read the intro to that. He says, modern medicine knows very little about the pineal gland's role, but it has rich metaphysical history. Descartes, for example, believed that the pineal gland was the seat of the soul, and both Western and Eastern mystical traditions place that as our highest spiritual center. I therefore wondered if excessive pineal DMT production was involved in naturally occurring psychedelic type states. These might include birth, death, near-death, psychosis, and mystical experiences. Only later, when the study was well underway, did I also begin considering DMT's role in the alien abduction experience. Okay, so let's put all this together. Let's see what this has to say. This is Rick still talking, Dr. Strassman. Those who have undergone alien abduction and their advocates. Okay, so here. I'm if you can't tell, I'm excited about this. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss here, okay? So those who have undergone alien abduction and their advocates may interpret my suggestion that DMT is intimately involved in these events as a challenge to the reality of their experience. So basically he's saying, you know, people who have undergone alien abductions might think it's challenging to say that DMT is involved. Opponents and supporters of abortion rights may find fault with my proposal that a pineal DMT release at 49 days after conception marks the entrance of the spirit into the fetus. Brain researchers may object to the suggestion that DMT affects the brain's ability to receive information rather than only generating those perceptions. They also may dismiss the proposal that DMT can allow our brains to perceive dark matter or parallel universes, realms of existence inhabited by conscious entities. So look at everything that he's saying. And remember, this falls in line perfectly with the Neo-Genian system, which I explained a little bit to you about how we are zetas, which are eternal beings of frequency that connect to this reality by using avatars as a means to tune in to this particular range of frequencies. Our system, the Neo-Genian system, basically says, through our system of meta-rationalism, this is a mathematical reality, a reality of frequencies. We can understand metaphysics rationally. We can use our intuition to tap into other domains of existence, and that we're beings of frequencies having this experience in, the so-called physical realm through tuning in via the body a particular range of frequencies, but we have the ability to tune into other ranges of frequencies as well, and other domains, just completely different domains. So basically what Rick is saying here is that he believes or suggests that DMT is involved with the alien abduction experience, that it's possible that DMT release at 49 days after conception is when the spirit's entrance to the fetus, which we would say in our terms, a zetic mind, would link to an avatar. Now, we don't have the idea of like a spirit actually entering the body. It's not like that. That's very cartoonish, but it's the idea that we as a zetic mind don't exist in this domain at all. We exist in a frequency domain. But by linking to these avatars, by having a frequency function linked to a space-time function, we're able to perceive reality as though we are in it. So it's kind of like when you're playing a video game, right? You're holding the controller, you're playing a video game character. You're not inside that character. You're completely and totally outside of the game, but you're controlling the game character. Same thing here. The soul, or a zeta, isn't like in you. It's what you are. It's controlling the character. It's like when you put on a virtual reality headset. You aren't actually in the VR world. You're outside of the VR world, but it seems like you're in the virtual world because that virtual headset tunes you in to the experience of that virtual world. Well, your body is like that virtual headset, tunes you into this world, but you're not actually in this world. You are an eternal mind, a being of frequencies, of pure energy that exists not in a physical state whatsoever, but as a mental being. So, he suggests that it has to do with alien abduction experience, that it has to do with the link to a fetus at what he conjectures 49 days, and that the brain does not generate the DMT experience, but rather alters alters the brain so that it can receive information. See, so this is what he's proposing. Not that, oh man, I just got really high, that was trippy because my brain generated these hallucinations. Rick is saying, no, it's altering the brain so that it can receive information. We would look at that a little differently, but very, very close, in that we are gaining perceptions into other realities, but it has to do with altering the brain. Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's very, very close. And that DMT can allow us to perceive dark matter, parallel universes, and realms of existence inhabited by conscious entities. Now, remember, what I think is so fascinating about this is that this doctor he's not some, loon. He's not some conspiracy theorist. And when he got into this research, he did not expect any of this. He went into this thinking that it was all going to be hallucinations. When interviewing the people's experiences, he even pushes them more towards like, hey, these are archetypes, right? Hey, this is like a dream, right? And they're like, no, this is real. So he came to these conclusions basically from not a skeptical position, but definitely not a bias. He did not expect this, right? He did not expect to come to these speculative conclusions. But let's continue here. We're going to read now. I'm sorry. I have a highlighted passages that I want you want to go through here. Yeah, real quick. There's just so many things I want to read because I want to get to the actual reports here. But Rick says, however, just as likely as the theory that these worlds only exist in our minds is that they are in reality outside of us and freestanding. If we simply change our brain's receiving abilities, we can apprehend and interact with them. So, yes, very, very in line with what we talk about. Here we go. Okay. A couple more things from Rick. And then, all right, now we're going to get into a couple more things. So another reason why to categorize these experiences is to support the hypothesis that outside administered DMT elicits altered states of consciousness similar to those people who report during spontaneous psychedelic experiences, near-death and mystical states, and the phenomenon that we call alien abduction. If drug-induced and naturally occurring conditions appear to have sufficient overlap, it supports a role for endogenous DMT in the production of these spontaneous psychedelic experiences that would open to a wide range of possibilities for us to understand and apply. So what is Rick essentially saying? What he's essentially saying is that, so first of all, we're going to see these very wild experiences that people have with DMT and how it correlates to the alien abduction experience. We also know that the body produces DMT. So essentially what Rick is saying is like, hey, all these people who have these alien abduction experiences, what could be happening is that their body produced DMT, and so that they had this experience. And so when I read to you some of these wild experiences, you can imagine if someone didn't do any drug and suddenly they were taken to another dimension, another domain. Yeah, that's going to seem very much like an alien abduction experience. I mean, what else would you say? What else? Like if you're the average person and don't understand things about like interdimensionality and how the brain operates in being a receiver of information and transmission of frequencies and all that. Yeah, anyway, I'm excited. Let's just move on to more. So this is a report, okay, by someone named Aaron. So it says, in the last chapter, we heard about Aaron's experiences of unseen worlds. Let's return to his first non-blind high dose of DMT. He looked at me about 10 minutes after the injection and shrugged, laughing, and said, first, there was a mandala-like series of visuals. Then an insect-like thing got right in my face, hovering over me as the drug was going in. This thing sucked me out of my head into outer space. It was clearly outer space, a black sky with millions of stars. I was in a very large waiting room. It was very long. I felt observed by the insect thing and others like it. Then they lost interest. I was taken into space and looked at. There is a sinister backdrop, an alien-type insectoid, not quite pleasant side of this. It's not a, we're going to get you, motherfucker. It's more like being possessed. During the experience, there is a sense of someone or something else there taking control. It's like you have to defend yourself against them, whoever they are, but they are certainly there. I'm aware of them, and they're aware of me. It's like they have an agenda. It's like walking into a different neighborhood. You're really not quite sure what the culture is. It's got such a distinct flavor, the reptilian being or beings that are present. So, okay, and by the way, I'll talk about my DMT experience later, near the end of this. But already, first of all, wild. Remember, for those who don't know or aren't familiar with DMT, when you do DMT, what happens is you become totally paralyzed and you basically black out. You completely lose touch with this reality. So these things he's describing, it's not like he's seeing these things while he's walking around or awake or his eyes are open. What happens is you become completely immobilized, you can't move, and you basically black out. And first of all, you experience beautiful patterns, which are possibly frequency patterns, beautiful, and then you get jettisoned into what could be another domain. We're going to talk about that, and I'm going to give you my opinions. At the end of this, I'll talk about my experience and give you my opinions on the DMT experience, what I think about it, if I think it's real, if I think it's in the mind, etc. Anyway, I completely forgot my point. My point is, do you also see sort of the correlation here between what was talked about in the Law of One and this report about there being control and dominance and an agenda, etc.? So Rick says, how about the scary element, I asked. What's the worst they could do if they are unleashed with access to you? Aaron replies, that's what it's about. It's the sense of the possibility that's so strange. Rick continues, in a later chapter, we'll read about the physical problems Lucas encountered after his high-dose session. However, it's interesting to review part of a letter he wrote to us a few days after the experience. There is nothing that can, so this is another trip report, right? There is nothing that can prepare you for this. There is a sound, a bzzz. It started off and got louder and louder and faster and faster. I was coming on, and then pow, there was a space station below me and to my right. There were at least two presences, one on either side of me, guiding me to a platform. I was also aware of many entities inside the space station, automatons, android-like creatures that look like a cross between crash dummies and the Empire troops from Star Wars, except that they were living beings, not robots. They seemed to have checkerboard patterns on parts of their bodies, especially their upper arms. They were doing some kind of routine technological work and paid no attention to me. In a state of overwhelmed confusion, I opened my eyes. Okay, so again, imagine this experience of this person hearing a bzzz and then suddenly being shot to another realm in space with a space station, entities doing work on technology, being led onto a platform. So imagine, because DMT is produced in the body. Let's say someone's just laying in bed, and for whatever reason, they have a DMT experience because of the DMT in their body. They would very likely claim to have had an alien abduction experience. Because if you're not thinking, if you're someone, most of these people, if you've never done any of these things before and aren't even aware of that, like imagine if that happened to you right now. You'd probably be like, holy shit, I got abducted by aliens. You probably wouldn't think about drugs or psychedelics or anything like that. Most people don't even know about this substance. So here's another one, okay? These are different people, by the way. Oh, by the way, I want to tell you, these are different people. So there was Aaron, then there's Lewis. I think now this is Jeremiah. So I want to also put out there that these experiences that we are discussing that are very, very, very similar aren't coming from the same individual. These are different people experiencing similar things. So I believe this is someone named Jeremiah. And he's describing it now, right afterwards. He says, that was much more intense than the first major dose. It's a different world. Amazing instruments, machine type things. There was one person operating some of this stuff. I was in a big room and he was in another part of it. I feel a little shaky, a little hypersensitive. There are little tremors growing through my body. There was one big machine in the center with round conduits almost writhing, not like a snake, more in a technical manner. The conduits were not open at the end. They were solid blue-gray tubes made of plastic. The machine felt as if it were rewiring me, reprogramming me. There was a human, as far as I could tell, standing at some type of console, taking readings or manipulating things. He was busy at work on the job. I observed some of the results on that machine, maybe from my brain. It was a little frightening, almost unbearably intense. It all began with a whirring sound. And this is Jeremiah again. There were 4 distinct beings looking down on me like I was on an operating room table. I opened my eyes to see, again, imagine that this happened to you. This would feel like being examined by aliens, would it not? Does it not match very well the description? There were 4 distinct beings looking down on me like I was on an operating room table. I opened my eyes to see if it was you, talking about the doctor, but it wasn't. They had something and were observing the results. They are vastly advanced scientifically and technologically. They were looking just over the traction bar in front of me. I guess they were saying goodbye, don't be a stranger. Oh, one thing that I want to say, and I forgot to mention real quick. I know that like the thumbnail said, exposing dark entities or whatever, and we opened it up with talking about the Orion group and negative entities. But I want to make it clear that, as we'll see, some of these experiences seem very frightening, but other experiences seem more benevolent. So I don't mean to make it seem like that all these experiences are negative entities doing experiments on people. Some of them seem more benevolent and like entities that are trying to help and aid in some way. And by the way, we're skipping a lot of those stories because what we're focusing on today are the ones that seem very much like alien abduction experiences, and those can be more frightening, and those are a little more suspect. However, I do want to mention that there are many, 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 many positive experiences that people have with DMT. with encountering entities that are like, oh, we're so happy to see you here. We want to teach you things. We want to help you. We want to tell you about our world. We want to teach you how to do the things we can do. I'm paraphrasing here. But yeah, I just want to throw that out there, that while we're, this is a little more of a negative connotation because we're talking about the abduction experiences, there are many positive experiences that people have had with encountering so-called positive entities. Yeah, we always want to be skeptical. We want to be skeptical of everything. But I just want to throw out there, there's many positive experiences with possibly positive entities. So anyway. Oh, okay. Oh, so here's an interesting part, right? So Jeremiah just described this to Rick and Josette, who's in the room as well. I haven't read this book in a very long time, so I forget what role Josette plays, but Rick and Josette are helping these participants. So Josette made a comment on what Jeremiah was saying, and Josette said that some of what Jeremiah described reminded her somewhat of her own weird dreams, and she went on to tell us about one of them. Jeremiah replied, "That was a dream you described. This is real." See, this is the interesting part. Oftentimes the doctor or his, I forget who Josette is, but they try and be like, hey, yeah, like a dream, right? Or, oh yeah, like an archetypal symbol, right? And they're like, no, like a fucking alien, basically. They're like, no. Anyway, Jeremiah replied, "That was a dream you described. This is real. It's totally unexpected, quite constant and objective." Right? He's saying it's constant and objective. It's not like a dream. It's there. "One could interpret your looking at my pupils as being observed and the tubes in my body as the tubes I'm seeing, but that's a metaphor. This is not at all a metaphor. It's an independent, constant reality." Josette collected the last blood sample and left the room, closing the door behind her. Jeremiah and I relaxed quietly together. And so this is Rick talking. "DMT has shown me that reality the reality that there is infinite variation on reality. There is the real possibility of adjacent dimensions. It may not be so simple as that there's alien planets with their own societies. That's too proximal. It's not like some kind of drug. It's more like..." Oh, no, I'm sorry. I think this is Jeremiah talking. Yes. I'm sorry. This is not Rick. This is Jeremiah talking. Jeremiah saying, "DMT has shown me that there are infinite variations on reality. That there is the real possibility of adjacent dimensions. It might not be as simple as alien planets with their own societies. That's too proximal. And this is not like some kind of drug. It's more like an experience of a new technology than a drug. You can choose to attend to this or not. It will continue to progress without you paying attention," meaning that world is still there and going, even if you're not tuned into it, even if you're not experiencing it. "You return to not where you left off, but to where things have gone since you left. It's not a hallucination, but an observation. When I'm there, I'm not intoxicated, I'm lucid and sober." So you can see, this guy is pretty adamant. Like, no, it's not a dream. It's real. Yeah. And like I said, I've experienced DMT, and I'll tell you what I think at the end of this. But let's see. Let's do another report here. And okay, so who is this now? Let me see who this is. Ben. So this is Ben. Ben says, "It started with a sound. It was high-pitched, like a tightly taut wire." They all talk about this sound. Now, you know what I will say, though? What I will say is I'll tell you the details of my experience. However, the odd thing is I did not experience a sound. Almost everyone I've talked to and all the reports I've heard experience a sound. I didn't. Mine was silent. Mine was dead silent. Um, yeah, but I will say on LSD, I've gotten to very, very high levels on LSD where I've experienced the bright white light of the source. Just like, oop. All right, sorry, I hit my microphone. Just the white light of the source. And anyway, in leading up to experiencing that, you can use the mind to get to higher and higher levels if you focus right and everything. So in doing that, if one does that, you can feel, it's very, very hard to describe. You can feel the frequencies start to fall. It's like the frequencies start to fall away until all that's left is the white light. And you can hear this occurring as well. Because they describe, in DMT, they describe like as a whirring or a buzzing that gets louder and louder and louder and louder. What's really interesting is in my DMT experience, it was the opposite. And I'm wondering if it's similar. And the reason why I'm wondering this is because what they're saying is they basically hear a sound that gets louder, 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 louder. And then they experience this new realm. What I experienced got slower, 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 slower. And I experienced the pure white light. So I'm wondering if it's, perhaps a tuning function where one is going, where I went in LSD was not to another domain, but to sort of the base reality where frequencies were sort of like everything was falling away. But anyway, what I heard was, yeah, it starts off like a woo, 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 and then gets slower and slower. So it's whoa, 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 and then nothing. And then it's just the white light of the source. And it reminds me a lot of binaural beats. If you listen to binaural beats, it reminds me, it's not exactly like that, but it's similar to binaural beats. And so I'm wondering if this is possibly like the tuning function, tuning into different domains, and it would make sense for, anyway, I digress. That was that's a particular LSD experience that I've had. But let's continue with this, and I'll tell you about my DMT experience at the end. So anyway, so this is another person. We've heard from multiple different people. This is another person, and see the similarities, right? It's the similarities between experiences here. It's not like, we've heard from Ben, Jeremiah, and I forget the different four people so far. They're having similar experiences. This is not just like some person who was like really obsessed with Star Wars or something, so he experienced that. And then someone else was like really obsessed with Lord of the Rings, so they experienced elves or whatever. No, it's common and unexpected experiences. So this is Ben speaking. Says it started out with a sound. It was high pitched, like a tightly taut wire. There were 4 or 5 of them. They were on me fast. As crazy as this sound, they looked like saguaro cactus, very Peruvian in color. They were flexible, fluid, geometrical cacti, not solid. They weren't benevolent, right? They weren't good, but they weren't non-benevolent. They probed. They really probed. They seemed to know time was limited. They wanted to know what I was doing. They wanted to know what I, this being who had shown up, was doing. See, this is also really interesting. They seem to be, people seem to be transported often to places with machinery, a waiting room, or mechanical devices. And a lot of them are like expecting people to show up or entities to show up. And a lot of them know that time is limited. So this is another possibility that it's possible that entities in a dimension have constructed some type of technology to have Zedic minds tuned, sort of like a not literally a magnet of some kind, but some sort of receiver, or perhaps it's a transmission. Perhaps it's a transmission that one can tune into. I don't know. But anyway, it seems like a possibility. they have some kind of technology for localizing you in a specific area, perhaps. But this is also a common experience. Is these people, these entities expecting you to be there, it being in a technological area, a waiting room of some kind. Anyway, they were probing. They seemed to know that time was limited, and they wanted to know what I was doing. What I, this being who had shown up, was doing. I didn't answer. They knew. Once they decided I was okay, they went about their business. So then Rick interjects. His eyes were open, the person who's talking right now, Ben. His eyes were open, glazed, staring at the ceiling. He seemed unable to grasp what he had just undergone. Rick says, I know, it sounds incredible to you, to us too, but it happens. See, this is really funny, is that he, the volunteers like can't believe what he just experienced. And the doctor's basically like, yeah, I know it seems crazy. It seems crazy to us too, but it happens. Kind of like saying we've heard this before. Like, people tell us this, and that's really interesting to me. So it says, haltingly, as if he weren't really sure he wanted to tell us, he said, I felt like something was inserted into my left forearm, right here, about 3 inches below this chain-like tattoo on my wrist. It was long. There were no reassurances with the probe, simply business. Laura asked, was there any fear? And I don't know who these different people are, Laura, and what, they're probably just different people helping. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've read this book. So Ben says, maybe at the onset, at just having my ego brushed aside, when they were on me, there was a little bit more confusion than fear, kind of like, hey, what's this? And then there they were. There was no time for me to say, who the hell are you guys? Let's see some ID. So then now Rick is talking. There are surprising and remarkable consistencies among volunteers' reports of contact with non-material beings. Sound and vibration build until the scene almost explosively shifts to an alien realm. Volunteers find themselves on a bed or in a landing bay, research environment, or a highly technological room. The highly intelligent beings on this other world are interested in the subject, seemingly ready for his or her arrival, and wasting no time in getting to work. There might be one being that's clearly in charge, directing the others. Volunteers frequently comment about the emotional quality of the relationships, loving, caring, or professionally detached. Their business of these entities appeared to be testing, examining, probing, and even modifying the volunteer's mind and body. Sometimes testing came first, and after results were satisfactory, further interactions took place. They also communicated with the volunteers, attempting to convey information by gesture, telepathy, or visual imagery. The purpose of this contact was uncertain, but several subjects felt a benevolent attempt on the being's part to improve us individually or as a race. And this is another thing that I want to say real quick. I'm going to discuss my opinions on if I think it's real or if I don't think it's real. But real quick, one thing that I will say is that with the idea of this, let's say that it's not real, and let's say that it's a tapping into the collective unconscious. One thing that's hard to comport with that idea is that, okay, so if you do mushrooms or something like that, if one does mushrooms or something like that, yeah, you'll get, like Eastern symbolism you'll see, and mandalas, and a lot of stuff you might associate with a lot of symbology that's from our history, a lot of stuff you might interpret as being tapped into the collective unconscious. This is just weird. Being in an alien-like probing room where beings are waiting for you, wanting to know what you're doing there and trying to do experiments, and that is very hard to explain that as simply being a manifestation of the collective unconscious, because it's so wildly unexpected and divorced from our past experiences as humans. This is not like a collective unconscious information or memory logged away that through, through our ancestors' interactions that we're recalling or something, or bringing back to the surface. This is very alien, strange, and unexpected. One could say, however, that perhaps one is delving even deeper than the human collective unconscious, just to the universal collective unconscious, where there would be alien like imagery and experiences. That is possible. However, these are very strange experiences. And it's very hard to make that a satisfactory answer or explanation. There seems to be a more veridical, real phenomena happening here, which fits in extremely well with how we understand reality to work in the Neogenian system. So let's continue here. This is someone else named Rex. So Rex says, when I was first going under, there were these insect creatures all around me. And this is very common to describe them as being insect-like or reptile-like. Very, very common. Anyway, when I was first going under, there were these insect-like creatures all around me. They were clearly trying to break through. I was fighting letting go of who I am or was. The more I fought, the more demonic they became, probing into my psyche and being. I finally started letting go parts of myself, as I could no longer keep so much of me together. As I did, I still clung to the idea that all was God and that God was love. And I was giving myself up to God and God's love because I was certain that I was dying. As I accepted my death and dissolution into God's love, the insectoids began to feed on my heart, devouring the feelings of love and surrender. It's not like LSD. Things really closed in around me in comparison to the spaciousness that I feel with LSD. There was no feeling of space, everything was in close. I've never seen anything like that. They were interested in emotion. As I was holding on to my last thought, that God equals love, they said, even here? Even here? I said, yes, of course. They were still there, but I was making love to them at the same time. They feasted as they made love to me. I don't know if they were male or female or something else, but it was extremely alien, though not necessarily unpleasant. The thought came to me with certainty that they were manipulating my DNA, changing its structure. And then it started fading. They didn't want me to go. Rick interjects real quick and says, remembering my previous stories, I said, yes, they are interested in us and our feelings, and no, they don't want to let us go. The volunteer continues, the sheer intensity was almost unbearable. The forms became increasingly sinister the more I fought. I'm going to need therapy after this. Sex with insects. Rick interjects, still grasping at a psychological explanation for these strange experiences, I tried saying this. That's them, your fears and your limits. So what Rick is basically saying, Rick is saying, at this moment, I'm still trying to figure out a psychological explanation for this, that it's not real, that it's some manifestation of the psyche. So I tried suggesting that, what you're experiencing is a manifestation of your fears and your limits. Because he's trying to, the doctor's trying to, and that's one of the things I really like about this is this doctor was coming from a very grounded place, trying to find psychological explanations. The volunteer wouldn't bite. He said, maybe, I don't know. It was nonverbal communication. Even here, was not spoken in words. It was an empathic communication, a telepathic communications. After about 20 minutes, he didn't yet quite seem back. Rick asks, how do you feel now? The volunteer replies, Right now, my body doesn't feel quite my own. There is still something of the other dimension flowing through it. I feel permeated by something else. How about emotionally? Emotionally? Emotionally, I'm slightly euphoric. Glad to be alive? He laughed, looking at me in a more focused manner. Yes, glad to be alive. You may have passed out as they were feeding on you. I wouldn't be surprised. That would probably make most people faint. That's right, that's true. Depending on the person, it could throw them over the edge. Is it self? Is it other? I just don't know. I just don't know where these things come from. As was often the case, answering... Oh, hold on. Rex echoed what many volunteers stated when they thought about the reality of their encounters with these otherworldly beings. This question about being high, I don't know. I had my capacities. I was able to observe quite clearly. I didn't feel stoned or intoxicated. It was just happening. This is a little later, but Rex is talking again in another session, I believe. I now have the feeling that there's something more that I can't access in my daily life. I guess it's the feeling of having made alien contact. I guess I have an expectation of that contact in everyday life. I hope for it. I know that it's there. I had to ask, what's the nature of alien sex? Would you say it's like intercourse? Or is it more the feeling, or what? It's positive and warm. Maybe it's like an after-sexual effect, feeling alive and alert. This is more information from Rex. I realize the intense... Okay, so this is in another session, but Rex is talking. I realized that the intense pulsating buzzing sound and vibration are an attempt by the DMT entities to communicate with me. The beings were there, and they were doing something to me, experimenting on me. I saw a sinister face, but then one of them somehow tried to begin to reassure me. Then the space opened up around me. There were creatures and machinery. It looked like it was in a field of black space. There were brilliant psychedelic colors outlining the creatures and the machinery. The field went on forever. They were sharing this with me, letting me see all of this. There was a female. I felt like I was dying. Then she appeared and reassured me. She accompanied me during the viewing of the machinery and the creatures. When I was with her, I had a deep feeling of relaxation and tranquility. She had an elongated head. I guess the guardians were keeping me from seeing her. So, and then Rick says, the doctor, trying again to interpret this psychologically, I said, the guardians are your own stuff. They're just the things that prevent you from seeing what's there. So again, Rick's trying to be like, it's in your mind. The guardians, that's part of your mind. They're trying to prevent you from seeing different things. Rick is constantly trying to have a psychological explanation for this. And again, just like last time, Rex gently rebuked me. Rex said, I know, but they do seem like something else. They seem like guardians, gatekeepers. They were pouring communication into me, but it was just so intense I couldn't bear it. There were rays of psychedelic yellow light coming out of the face of the reassuring entity. She was trying to communicate with me. She seemed very concerned for me and the effects I was experiencing due to her attempts at communicating. There was something outlined in green, and right in front of me and above me, it was rotating and doing many things. She was showing me, it seemed, like how to use this thing. It resembled a computer terminal. I believe she wanted me to try to communicate with her through that device, but I couldn't figure it out. See, again, very interesting. This is difficult to have a psychological explanation for. It's very hard to say that this is tapping into one's unconscious or collective unconscious when people are having experiences of entities in technologically advanced chambers, trying to communicate with them, getting them to use technology. It's a little too on the nose of what one would expect to actually happen in these types of situations. Now, we don't know for sure, and I will give my opinions on my experience and what I think about this, but good to be very open-minded about these things. So now Rick says, despite my better judgment, I now feel compelled to weigh in with my opinion regarding the experience of contact with alien life forms. Let's review the popular reported alien abduction experience. We will see the striking resemblances between these naturally occurring contacts and those reported in our DMT study. This remarkable overlap may ease our acceptance of my proposition that the alien abduction experiences is made possible by excessive brain levels of DMT. This may occur spontaneously through any of the previously described conditions that activate pineal DMT formation. It may also make DMT levels rise from taking in the drug from the outside, as in our study. So basically what Rick is saying is that he thinks that it's possible that alien abduction encounters are when DMT levels rise in the brain naturally and spontaneously for some reason, and someone has that experience. Because imagine you suddenly hearing a, and then being blasted somewhere else, having these beings like probe you, do experiments, try and communicate with you, etc., and then come back. Like, if that just happened to you without taking any kind of drug or knowing anything about this type of thing at all, yeah, that would seem like an alien abduction experience. And I want to highlight that all of this, so when it comes to the law of one, the raw material, right? That's very speculative. We don't know if it's true. We don't know if it's not true. This is rigorous clinical research done with many different cases, clinical, rigorous testing, etc. And has a lot of credibility behind it. We don't know what the results are. We don't know if these places that they're experiencing are actually real or not, but we have a lot of data that is clearly true, data that's gathered that makes a lot of sense. Now, this fits in very, very well with our Neogenian system. It fits in perfectly well, which is another reason why it merits investigation and study. So let me explain to you now my opinion. So when I did, I've only done it once, and I have an entire video on my DMT experience, so I'm not going to explain the whole thing, but I'll give you bits and pieces of it real quick. You can check out the video if you want to see the whole experience. I was taken into what felt like the very end of time, and it was in a complete black void, and within this black void was a black cube. This black cube was probably the size of an average size bedroom, but it was a perfect black cube, but probably the size of an average size bedroom. I was inside of that cube with another entity. Now, this entity, I got the feeling was if you want to know the whole detail, DMT is very, very hard to describe. So if you want to know the whole detail, like I said, check out my other video. But this entity was a completely black silhouette. The closest thing that I can describe to it is if you've ever seen people wear those black latex cat suits that cover their entire body. They're just black, shiny latex suits, just completely and totally black and shiny, covers their head, their face. You can't see any facial features. It's just black everywhere. That's what I encountered. And so what my experience essentially was, what it felt like was that this was at the very end of time where nothing at all existed. And the reason why that black cube existed was so that there would be some spatial area for me to be able to interact with this being. Because if nothing existed, there'd be no space, right? So it's like you had to generate sort of this cube to be able to interact with this being. What I felt like this being was since it was the very end of time, this would be when one is essentially God and that you're completely and totally isolated and there's no one but you. So this being was sort of like, you know how the black cube I said was there because that was the very bare minimum to have a space to be able to interact with? Well, it was sort of like this, a similar idea to this entity. It was myself, but projected in the form of this external being. We've talked about this a lot in my channel before, how reality others itself. So it was like me externalized, but it was there was a very, 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 very big romantic aspect to it, which fits in a lot with other videos that we've talked about too, with reality that divides itself for love's sake. Anyway, I got this was an aspect of me, but it was a very romantic feeling. It was like the perfect lover, and beyond any words that one could describe it, finding the perfect lover. This would be like finding your perfect match after lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes, because it's literally, we were so perfect that we were one, and there was no othering. An othering just had to occur so that some interaction could happen. So basically what happened was that me and this entity agreed that there would be a shattering of ourselves so that we could experience reality again. So basically it was the experience of what we've talked about in the Neogenian system a lot. At the end of time, everything is unified, everything is perfect, but then reality has to shatter itself to be able to experience multiplicity again, because it would be very isolating and lonely to be the only being in existence for eternity. So anyway, it was the experience of that, where this being and I, basically, which is the only part of myself that I could have a dialogue with, where this perfect love was felt, that we agreed to shatter ourselves, and in doing so, that we would forget. And so we agreed, and this process started to happen. And I remember it's literally the most heartbreaking thing I've ever experienced in my life, because you experience losing perfect love, essentially. And I felt the process of beginning to forget, and the process of beginning to forget. And I started to panic because, imagine being the end of time and knowing everything and whatever, and then starting to forget like what you are and where you are and what's going on as like the shattering process happens. So anyway, I kind of start to feel like forget, and it's extremely heartbreaking because I'm like losing my perfect lover, essentially, for all eternity, this eternal lover that's now being ripped away. So it's incredibly heartbreaking, panicking because I start to forget. And it's interesting because in my panic, I start to kind of run to the different sides of the room. And it was very, very odd because the geometry was very odd. So have you ever played those video games like Super Mario, where if you walk to one side of the screen, you'll come out again on the other side of the screen? It was kind of like that. I would walk to one end and I would come out like another end. So it was very confusing and disorienting. So there was all this like heartbreak, confusion, disorientation. Then I had the experience of going through basically like lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and experiencing that perfect love in bits and pieces in like different lovers throughout different lifetimes. Like every lover I had in every lifetime was like a piece of that. And not only in other lovers, but just like in everything, like in the sound of the bird outside or the wind. It was like, and in some way it was heartbreaking and comforting at the same time. It was heartbreaking because I had lost this love, but kind of comforting because the message was sort of like, I'm always there and I'm everywhere and all around you, all like, because it's all us, it's all me, it's all you, it's all we, it's all you, it's all me, it's all us. So that is everywhere in everything. It's in every lover that you meet. It's in every person you have an interaction with. It's in every bird song, in everything. It's in everything and everywhere. So it's very heartbreaking, very difficult, but then it very much switched to where I was inside of a toroidal shaped structure. And it wasn't like a built structure. Like this was very metaphysical. I was inside of a torus, and then there were many mathematical symbols and equations floating around. Not anything that could be understood in the notation that we know. It was, I think, different notation, different symbols, but it was the understanding that these were like mathematical symbols. And then finally, near the end, and this was the weirdest part, and this is kind of similar to what they were discussing. I felt like I was on a conveyor belt, and this is going to sound really weird, and this is the only way to describe it, like I was being injected with poison and candy. And that's not literally what it was. That's just hard. It's the only thing that I can describe. It was just the being injected with something that was extremely negative and toxic, as well as something that was just like very, you know how like candy is just like so sweet and like dripping with sweetness and sugary, and it's like almost too much. It's like overpoweringly sweet. It was just like the injection of these opposite sort of things, as I was going down this sort of conveyor belt thing. Okay, so let me tell you about what I felt about this experience. So when I experienced this interaction with this entity, do I think that that was real? Do I think that that actually happened? I don't know. I don't feel like some of these people are like, oh yeah, it felt more real than real. It absolutely 100% was totally real. I mean, I was in another place. Absolutely. But was I actually interacting with another sentient being, or was it something else? Honestly, to me, it felt more like a memory. But I was still able to interact in it. So it wasn't exactly like a memory, but to me, it felt more like a memory. To me, I didn't have the feeling of like, oh yes, I'm absolutely experiencing this entity right now. This is a very real entity. We are in a real place. To me, it felt like a memory. That's how I felt. And as well as like the candy injection aspect of it, that was very odd. I did not feel like that was a memory. But even that, I did not get the experience of like, oh yes, this is 100% real. This is more that it was very strange in that I don't know what that was. And it did have a very, I don't know if I want to say, it had a very odd feeling to it. Very, very odd. But that as well, I couldn't say, oh yes, 100% it felt real. I wouldn't say that. And that one did not feel like a memory either. I don't know what that was. That was strange. That was nearing the end of the trip. Oh, I will mention one more thing. Before I got to that portion of the trip, before I went to that space with that entity, I saw a face that was made of fractals, and this entity was very, very creepy. It was a very smiling face, and it looked a lot like what one would picture the devil would look like. And it kind of had the feeling of like, oh, I've got something to show you. Like that was kind of the feeling like, oh yeah, it was just a head made of fractals. It felt like things came together to kind of form the head, like geometry came together to form the head. And yeah, it was very devious, very smiling. And it was that feeling of like, I got something to show you. And then that's when when I got blasted to the experiences that I had. That was also interesting. Now do I feel like that was a real actual entity? I can't, I'm not like the people who are like, oh yes, absolutely 100% for sure. I don't know. However, this face is one that if you Google it, it's called Heyuka. Many people have encountered this being on their DMT trips. And yeah, I've seen images that people have shown of and it's like, oh yeah, that's it. It's not exactly the same because it's something that you can't even describe, but as much as one could do and get close to it, it's like, oh yeah, that's that. Whatever that is though, whether it's an actual entity or something in the unconscious, I think what humanity is pulling from with their depictions of Satan. Because you've seen those cartoon Satans where it's like the red face with the horns and the smiling smile. And there's a lot of depictions of the devil like that. Like it's really close to that. So I feel like, but it's in like a very basic raw form, like a fractal-like form. So whether this thing is real or not, I am speculative that this thing, whether it's an archetypal pattern or it's an actual entity or it's both, because original archetypal patterns can emanate from actual entities. That's a possibility for sure. It's a possibility. But I think that is the core, the intuitive core from which humanity is possibly pulling from, that inspired their depictions of this being that way. And I'm not saying that I believe that's the devil, by the way. That's not what I'm saying. I don't believe in the devil as it's described in Christianity, but I do believe in interdimensional entities that have different functions and different interests, etc. So I would say that based on my experiences, I'm not sure. The first one felt like a memory. None of them felt like 100% for sure. Oh yes, I know these are sentient beings. I know that these are, I would be more apt to think that the first thing I experienced, with the black cube and all of that, was either a memory or it could be a transmission. That's another thing that it kind of felt like it could have been, like almost, if you found like a tape recorder and it had a recording on it. It almost kind of felt like the higher dimensional version of that, like almost like this is something that's being transmitted and you can pick up on it and interact in it. So something like, it had that feel, or like a memory. It had that sort of feeling to it. Now, however, the interactions that these people report are very, very based on the reports that these people have given. At the very least, I would say that this is something that requires investigation. This is something that requires study. It's the reports are very compelling, and it fits in perfectly with how we understand existence to be. Does that mean we know what's true? No, it doesn't, but it fits in very, very well. So rationally speaking, so this is a good way to understand meta-rationalism. Rationally speaking, this shows a very compelling, it's highly compelling as something that needs to be investigated. Now, even looking at the law of one, that's a lot more speculative. It could be true, might not be true, we don't know. But this information, this is something that can be investigated. Like DMT, research can be done on this easily. Research needs to be done on this. And the way we rationally understand existence to work, that is reality being composed of mathematical frequencies, all of us being mathematical minds that exist in a domain that we are currently linked to, with bodies and brains serving as the transducing mechanism or the interface mechanism, and the existence of CFDs or collective frequency domains which other beings can establish and create their own dimensions. This fits in very well. It fits in very well with the idea that humans can develop the ability to tune into these dimensions. So we don't know if it's real, we don't know if it's true, but it's very promising, very interesting, and something that I would say needs further investigation and is highly compelling and very interesting. And quite frankly, it's astonishing to me that more people aren't aware of this and discussing this sort of thing, where you can literally experience another dimension and other entities, possibly. And people are just like, oh, I wonder what's on Netflix tonight. It's like, what? Aren't you kind of curious about the other dimensions that you could, like, aren't you curious about if that's real, or don't you want to I don't know. It's just the priorities that people have are very, very interesting. Anyway, I want to say, once again, though, when it comes to this stuff, remember, don't do anything dangerous, don't do anything illegal, and don't feel pressured to do any of this stuff. You don't need to, it's not like you need to do these things to reach enlightenment or anything like that. No, not at all. You have the capacity within yourself, without this sort of stuff, to be able to reach higher modes of consciousness. But very, very interesting as well to see how this also fits in with a lot of what the law of one talks about. It's interesting to see these connections and put these in the speculative box of, could this be true? Could it be true? Possibly. Well, my friends, I think we're going to wrap it up there, but make sure you tune in next week as we continue to explore information like this. Check out my other videos if you want to know more about Law of One. Check out my playlist on the Law of One if you want to hear about my DMT experience in more in detail. Check out my video on my DMT experience. And as always, if you do enjoy my work, consider supporting over on Patreon. It helps out a lot. You get access to members only, all of our members only videos and new members only videos every single week. And you can get access to that by joining any tier on Patreon or tier 2 or higher on YouTube. And remember, never feel obligated to support monetarily. Seriously, don't feel pressure. Don't feel obligated. Only do it if you can afford it and you feel happy to and you want to. Seriously. That being said, I do want to support, shout out those who do support, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, DB, Enki, Nuselina, Paul Rogers III, Eric Fire, Masam, Ryan, and Christopher Smith, and everyone else. Thank you very much.